Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's session, Don't Underestimate Fraud Risk. Thank you to everyone for joining us today to listen in on this extremely valuable and important topic. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Emma, and I'm here on the marketing team at SafePass, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Salih Ahmed, a Group Internal Auditor at Group Roche, and SafePass CEO Adil Khan. So I will quickly ask our speakers to present themselves. I'll give you a brief introduction into who SafePass is, and then we'll dive right into the discussion, which is why you're all here today. So, Salih.
Hi, good to be here. I want to speak up about myself a little bit. I am 52 years old. I completed all my entire education in Turkey. After studying political science and international relations at university, I did my MBA. Then my adventure in the private sector began. I started my career as an auditor at Arthur Andersen, which was in the Big Five at that time. Now it's non-existent. Then I worked in Turkey's dominant sectors such as textile, iron and steel, construction and petroleum. I worked for a short time in a non-audit position at a major FMCG firm in Egypt. It is the only position in my entire working life where I sit on the other side of the table other than internal audit. Finally, I work in the audit department of a large retail group operating all over the world. I've gained my experience in many sectors and different locations in the world in my working life. Learning something new never stops. I started working in the internal audit profession compared to 25 years ago. It's a different point of view now. I also experienced some geographical advantages of the location that I live. I live in Turkey, by the way. In this environment, especially considering with the addition to Middle East, crisis and fluctuation is part of our lives. We have experienced many political crises, economic fluctuations, and also natural disasters, of course. This is one of the factors that directly affect our profession and the companies we work with. So we learned how to adapt and how to survive. And lastly, I want to say a few words about the social media platform, LinkedIn. That's why we are here together. I'm at the platform for about more than a year, a little bit now. Through this, I had the opportunity to meet many eye-opening and inspiring professionals at LinkedIn. At the same time, I had the opportunity to share my experiences and knowledge. After all, I had the opportunity to meet the valuable people who organized this webinar. Once again, I want to give my gratitude to Emma and Audit. They gave me a chance to transfer my experiences and express myself in the subject of internal audit and fraud, of course. That's all I can say now.
Okay, Salih, thank you, and we appreciate
You're very welcome.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you joining us today, and we appreciate all the audience listening to this very important topic at the beginning of this year. My name is Adil Khan. I am the CEO here at SafePass. I have about 25 years experience in enterprise risk management, enterprise business applications. Started off many years ago, some startups, did some Big Four stint, worked at Oracle, and in about 2002, when Sarbanes-Oxley became the law of the land here in the U.S., I started looking at that. I was running a public company at the time that traded on NASDAQ, so I had the opportunity to implement some of those internal controls for financial risk management in our own company, and I learned a lot. And subsequently, I started a consulting firm, which is now, we have sort of morphed into a product company, which is SafePass. So it's been a long journey for me, a 25-year journey, in pursuit of just improving and optimizing businesses, and that's been our mission here at SafePass, is to help customers reduce risk, improve business efficiencies, improve bottom line. Because I think we believe that if businesses thrive, communities do better, people do better. So it's all part of, driving more economic for peoples and community around the world. So we're excited to have that opportunity to talk to you today about what we are learning in the field. I've done a lot of case studies, about 200 some customers that I've visited. I've written a book on this topic called Governance, Risk, and Compliance Handbook, and that has gotten some information about customer stories, what we learned from the market, where internal controls were weak. We help them develop strong internal controls, automate those controls. So hopefully in this session, I'll be able to share some of those case studies and examples that bring real world credentials to this session today. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So as you can see, we're in very good hands this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are. So for those of you who don't know SafePass, briefly, as Adil said, we've been in the risk management space for about, 20 years now. And we help organizations truly mitigate risk by combating, internal, external threats using our end-to-end controls platform. So we really focus on giving organizations that really granular, deep level, having everything in one centralized place to meet both current and future needs of the organization. So before we dive into the session, just a few housekeeping items. Session is being recorded for reference after the session. All attendees are on mute. We have tried to incorporate questions that you have been sending over into the session, but we will have a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to put those questions in the control panel, and we'll be sure to answer those at the end of the session. And if we don't, we'll follow up with you in an email. So let's take it away. Adil, if you want to start by explaining the big picture. Why are we all here today?
Yeah, I mean, a central theme to why we exist as SafePass today and what's our mission is around this one of these main observations that really frustrates me and I think annoys a lot of people. Even with all these major audit firms in place and audits going on rigorously, we're still losing $2.9 trillion annually just to fraud. And this is just what's recorded and typically in enterprise customers around the globe. So I think our mission is really important here as folks that work on audit is how can we get better at this? How can we reduce that number, maybe even prevent it with all the capabilities of technology available to us today? How can we apply those technologies to the profession of audit and improve risk management and controls for the companies we serve and the communities we live in? So that's kind of the mission of SafePass, and so that's a shocking number. So trillions are a lot of money. 2.9 trillion lost just last year, and it's also it's a powerful business case. It's a compelling business case to me. If your company is concerned about fraud and you want to improve that process, it should be very difficult with the stats that we're sharing today and the best practices we'll share, solutions we'll talk about, to really get a return on investment. I know that the boards and investors are looking for return on investment, anything they invest in, right? And so you can see in the second bullet point there that the 1/4 of the fraud involves loss of $1 million, right? So if you can just prevent, a few of those transactions or those activities in your business, you have a very strong return on investment, right? And procurement is obviously is the highlighted area. UN reported approximately 10 to 25% of public contracts are lost, and that hurts our people, our communities that we live in, right? So it directly impacts us, whether it's our business or in the community we live in. So I think it's really a mission that we all aspire to accomplish, and we can't do that without all the profession of audit becoming more aware of these things and giving them the tools and technology and know-how to make them successful at their jobs, because clearly we're not able to succeed with these kinds of numbers that are out there in the market. And in many reasons, technology is not the answer to everything. There's also having the good people and the culture in the organization and many other softer things that we're not going to get to today. recognize the technology is just part of that solution. Again, I won't read all the stats. You have this available to you. So please take a look, and I think that sets the agenda for the meeting today.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adil. And so what about, now we've set the scene, we've talked about the big picture, it's a huge, massive problem. So, what contributes to this problem in our, in the fast-paced digital world we live in, and obviously, the pandemic, how's that affected fraud? Sally?
Yep. The COVID-19 affected many businesses. Actually, it affected our lives, but if we consider the companies, especially the companies in some sectors, were affected more. Like tourism, like retail, we are affected a lot. This negative effect on companies seems to contribute even more to the already existing unemployment in some countries. When we consider in Turkey, also there may be companies going bankrupt through this process. Even if companies don't go down, they try to reduce their existing human resources, their staff, to minimize their cost. It's an event which we haven't seen before. Personally, I haven't seen anything like this before. COVID has also affected the business processes of the companies. Not only the companies, processes are also affected. If you look at this situation in terms of fraud, I can say that we are in a lot of change. Fraud existed before, but now even there are more opportunities to deal with it. The reports published by ASPFE in 2020 sheds lights on us. If you look at this report that comes out every 2 years, like Adil said, we can better understand what kind of situation we are facing. As Adil said, only the 5% of annual turnover to fraud we are losing, but the key word here is turnover, not profit. It's a huge number. If you consider the revenues produced by all the companies around the world, you can understand what I mean. Currently, most companies are struggling to survive, making business continuity plans, those type of things. If a company if a company doesn't have a unit or a process that evaluates fraud risks before COVID period, it is pointless to start it now in this COVID period. When I think of fraud risks about which companies facing in this COVID period, I think the most affected function is the internal control processes, because they are designed before COVID. The current internal control processes in companies, they are designed according to pre-COVID period. If these processes are not adapted to the current period, we have a new problem. The new fraud risks will arise, that's for sure. Another fraud risk is the relationship with the governments. Many governments around the world, they have taken many precautions, many measures to ease up this period. They want to make their citizens, their companies comfortable. Many of the governments, they gave money to the market, to the system. There may be some fraudsters who want to take advantage of this opportunity. This is one of the points I want to mention. And also, the last thing I should mention is the cybersecurity risk. It was there before, but because most of us working at home now, we are more vulnerable to the cyber attacks than usual. There was online scams, phishing, security breaches before, but now maybe even more, So also the personal data should be carefully protected in this period. Some aspects of this pandemic, if we go to backwards, when it's all started, it at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a rapid transaction. There was a curfew. All the businesses were blocked. People started working home very fast. They obtained the devices, for example, the computers or the laptops. They may not be completely secure. They didn't install software security updates to them. Network security setups are not made. Password protections, maybe they were absent. Also, the remote employees security training were also absent, or maybe a little bit less than usual. Because of that time, but all those things were not important. The important thing was the business. If the business fails, there will be no meaning to consider the security or fraud, whatever. In this first step, many of the security protocols were ignored, that's for sure. And the second step, people, and at the second stage of the pandemic, people understood that this pandemic is not going away easy. It will stay for some time. We all understood that. We saw, then we met with Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, those type of things were new to us. Online meetings, like we are doing now. At the second stage, many of the companies started to organize. Employees started to work in a hybrid way, sometime at home, sometime at the office. Some issues came up in this stage. The physical security of the laptops, it may be very simple or very easy to say, but we live with our children, with our families at home. Our laptops are threatened by them. They can spill water, they can drop something on them. So among other things, some backups came on mind that triggered cloud usage, for example, for many companies. I'm just giving examples. It can be different to some of us, but according to my observations, this is the situation. As the pandemic continues at the third stage, maybe the last ones, many people became psychologically unstable. Most people feared that they are going to lose their jobs because most of the businesses are negatively affected. So that was the situation at the last stage. Some employees in some countries, especially also in Turkey, salaries have been deducted because of working from home or some regulations. Especially those who have the opportunity intend to abuse with the help of low internal control mechanisms in this area. So this is the things that I can say for now.
Yeah, thanks for that insight, Salih. And what about, okay, so who commits internal fraud? Who are the people that commit internal fraud?
Yeah, thanks, Em. Yeah, I mean, it's a big puzzle, and there's a laundry list of items listed here. I won't have time to get through a whole slide deck today to go through everything, but please take a look at these items. It's a good checklist. I'll just talk through the key categories. There's the management fraud category. There's the internal fraud and employee fraud. Right? So these are the different two categories of internal fraud. There's frauds or simple things that like T&E, people just going out to dinner and the manager saying, okay, just put a little extra in the bill and I'll approve it, right? So that's a common mistake that people make or fraud they cause on their company. It's very easy to catch, obviously, with technology today. So it's something that we should really safeguard our companies against. There's more sophisticated fraud around the vendor setup. So we have, you may have seen some of the ransomware out there where it's been reported in the news that someone receives a email as if it's from the CFO saying, hey, can you transfer some funds to this bank account? I have an urgent need. And that's actually occurred. That fraud has materialized quite a bit around the world using various email spam techniques that are very credible. So companies are safeguarding themselves against that. Accounts payable, I've seen duplicate invoices, duplicate payments, supplier bank account changes, in some cases payroll information, changing it back. Most enterprise systems will do a good job of tracking the record of who last changed it. But there are people committing fraud that will go in and make a change. Let's say they'll change the approval hierarchy to process a purchase order, and they'll change it back. But the only thing that the person goes in and sees is the correct account. Same thing with bank accounts. You have an automated payment process, so you change the bank account from a vendor account to your account. You transfer the funds, and then you change it back, right? So people have super user access in enterprise systems to be able to maintain them, especially in these, as Saleh was saying, in the COVID days, where we're working from home, and not only our PCs are less protected, but our enterprise systems have been opened up more for flexibility and people's convenience. But what that has done is lowered the barriers for the people that want to commit fraud to get in and perform those kinds of duties. Where especially if you don't have good segregation of duties, so the same person now has the ability to go in and perform, transactions like creating a supplier and paying a supplier. So those are some examples of fraud that we have uncovered in our experiences at SafePass.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adil. So why do these people commit fraud, Saleh? What are the reasons behind it all?
Why people commit fraud? Yeah, it's a big question. Before going on the Pentagon fraud model, I want to say a few words about who commits fraud. We know from the reports and statistics that typical fraud offender looks a lot like any other high-performing trusted employee. According to reports, 90% of fraud offenders have no prior history of fraud, and 55% of them no history of any workplace misconduct. In fact, only 13% of fraudsters have poor performance evaluation on the record. So if you think about those type of statistics, it is we can say that it is the circumstances and the environment, not the personality, that leads people to commit fraud. In fact, statistics show that most people can commit fraud under the right circumstances. So if we go through the Pentagon model, fraud model, shows us 5 factors. 3 of them we know: pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. 2 of them are new: capability and arrogance. We all know that and familiar with the triangle model. Let's go through them a little bit so that we can explain the factors committing fraud, who commits fraud. Pressure is one of the factors that motivates the employees to commit fraud. Everybody knows the drivers that committing fraud. These pressures may be unrelated to work. They can be personal things, such as big amount of debt, drug addiction, gambling addiction, divorce, other family issues. Those type of things can be a pressure for the employees to commit fraud. However, there may also be work-related pressures, such as high demands of from the supervisors regarding meeting the financial targets or sales targets, for example, performance related bonuses. Those type of pressures can be also considered as a topic inside the pressure. If we come to opportunity, it is the risk factor that internal controls when they are weak and non-existent or non-existent. Companies with strong controls in place help to limit opportunities for employees to commit fraud or engage in fraudulent activities. Companies with limited or no internal controls, that makes the opportunity for the fraudsters. Basically, It's the simple fact, you know, if you leave the door open, anybody can enter easily. So you have to close the door and lock it. The other thing is rationalization is one of the important factors of the pentagon or triangle. The fraudster justifies his fraud. For instance, a person may feel it's permissible to steal because there is an injustice was done to him or her, such as not being paid a fair salary or bonus, or management not caring about his overburdened workload. I mean, he can work. He works very hard, but they don't even say thank you to him, for example. Rationalization can also exist if an employee sees his superior displaying unethical behavior, especially his manager or his director, whatever. Unethical behavior and getting away with it, that's one of the rationalization of the subject. Another line of the Pentagon is arrogance. It is the character of someone who feels that he has the power over everything in the company. These type of people has a tendency to ignore the internal controls that exist in the company. They can develop fraud strategies, and they can oversee social situations that will make his personal profit. It is like seeing himself above the rules, you know. Mostly these people are they usually at the high level of the organizations, like CEOs, CFOs, etc. One of the characteristics of arrogance is the personal ego. They have a mindset of the celebrity issues, you know, and also they have the idea of internal controls do not apply to them. They are above them, you know, and also they are having behavior that tends to intimidate subordinates. They have autocratic management styles. This is the topics that we can discuss in arrogance subject. And the competence, also one of the lines of the Pentagon model, is the person's ability to commit fraud. People must have good abilities to recognize these opportunities that he can carry out fraud tactics in a suitable way, you know. I can say that stupid people cannot make fraud because they can be caught very easily. This means sharp-minded and clever people can commit fraud. At least they think that they have the ability to get away with it, you know. So this is the brief explanation of who commits fraud and the explanation of Pentagon line model, you know.
Absolutely, many reasons as to why people, you know, commit fraud. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the next couple of slides. You know, feel free to reach out for the deck if you would like a copy, and we can send that over to you, no problem. So let's move on to, you know, best practices before we jump into, you know, how we can solve these problems. So some of the best practices, Adil, that organizations can take.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
And Saleh, feel free to jump in. So Saleh, thank you for that, you know, motivation around why people do it. And I think as you leave this webinar, you might feel a little suspicious looking over your shoulders in your own organization. So now we're going to help you kind of relax and tell you there is science to it, there is a methodology to it, and the best practices have been developed and matured over many, many decades that we're trying to summarize in a very limited time here. So know the exposure, right? So being able to understand and assessing what fraud is. So it starts by having a framework of measuring fraud. There are many frameworks available, or best practices available. There are methodologies that have been developed. You may be using one of those today. maybe it's time to look at the ones you've used and maybe add them. For example, the Benford analysis that I've used in the past. There's mean regression. There's a lot of statistical analysis you can apply to your transactions. You can take a big data load of all your invoices and payments and purchase orders and apply these methodologies to very quickly do that. You can do that in spreadsheets if you have a small business, if you're an enterprise, where you're processing, we have customers that are processing 20,000 payment requests a day in big batches. They're processing billions of dollars. So if you're in that scale, then you need to look at automation, and we can share some specific case studies with you. And then look for symptoms or evidence, right? So we encourage our customers to apply, because of the volume of business today is significant. Doing significant amount of transactions online. If you have a web store that you're getting on, your supply chain is automated. B2B transactions are automated through your ERP systems. So you can set up some rules. For example, in SafePass, we have the ability to define. I'll pick on a very simple example: a purchase order. A purchase order policy says, people can only spend up to $10,000 based on their job and title in the organization. And that's protected in your current business system, right? So if somebody tries to go to 11,000, it will protect that and say, no, it'll prevent that. So you can't do that because your authority is only 10,000. What we often see is that people will go around that policy by sending multiple POs that are less than 10,000, and most ERP systems, including the most modern ones, don't catch that. So you can do, 3 purchase order for 5,000, and because your approval authority is 10,000, they'll all go through. The accumulated value of those purchase order over a period of time, let's say a month, is greater than your authority. So often we see that. Other example of purchase orders are that are dated the same day the invoice is received. In other words, you actually are faking your control by saying that my invoice is not supposed to be, you're not supposed to receive the merchandise and all that, the three-way match control supposed to be in place, but you're kind of bypassing that control by backdating a purchase order. So those are things that systems can catch very easily. You can probably start doing some of that. You may be doing that today in spreadsheets. When we talk to our customers, we look for those kinds of weaknesses in their control framework and help them streamline, automate that. I won't have time to give example in every one of these 5 items, but those are a couple of examples I wanted to share with you. The other items that are just to watch out for is building the program. So programs, everything starts with your good designs. Your control designs have to be really, strong and effective. And then you've got to make sure those controls are operating effectively. And then you're continuously monitoring them. So the number 4 in our world, what we see today in a more modern approach is that if there is a violation of that policy, in other words, those 3 purchase orders were over the overall limit, the system will send a workflow approval because we are an enterprise company. So, I may be committing fraud in Dallas, Texas, where I live, and my manager, let's say Saleh, is sitting in Turkey, Istanbul. So he can see that workflow, and he can say, hey, Del, your purchase order limit has gone over your limit. Do you know that you're above your limit? And I'm going to prevent that purchase order from getting approved. Or Emma, as the auditor, can see that Saleh and I are working together, and she, as the auditor, can provide that input of control being effective. In other words, now we have an evidence that a fraud control is effectively operating, which is something that your external auditors and your management would be very happy to hear. Right. So those are some just examples in my experience on how you can apply this 5-step approach and what we're seeing from our customers that have adopted these good practices. And the follow-up, I should mention a very important point before we move on is it has to be closed loop. In the old days, and as I say old days, but I even see that today, a majority of our customers will treat it through emails. Emails are not workflow. What I mean by that is there's not ownership of activity of a control, and there's no response recorded in the same activity. So you will go through thousands of emails to be able to capture that. What the workflow does as an improvement over that process, it sends out the notification. In my example, let's say to Saleh. Saleh responds to it. That response is also captured. So now we have a true closed loop system. So when Emma, let's say, is the auditor, when she reviews it, she can see the full control operating effectively, right? And that's what we want to see our clients do. Instead of the old way of sending out spreadsheets and emails, because there's no track record of remediation or prevention of that risk.
Exactly, exactly. And also, I want to mention a little bit about data analytics. It's when I first started the profession, there was no data analytics, at least not this modern type of data analytics softwares like that. The main advantage, as Adil said, of using data analytics for internal auditors, for fraud detection especially, is that they can handle a huge amount of data at once. Data analytics also helps in tracking and the trends and possible problems faster than people can do. We internal auditors can do without the help of technology. So there are many advantages of data analytics for fraud detection. At least it automates the repeating tests, which saves a lot of time. Also, they normally, we as internal auditors cannot test all the transactions. We don't have time to do that. But when you use data analytics, they can search 100% of the transactions automatically for fraud indicator. Yeah, I agree with Adil on that. And about this next slide, fraud detection, fraud protection. Let's go about how can I say? Of course, policies and procedures are important aspects of the companies. We also, as internal auditors, I always say, they are the laws of the companies, which tells us the employees how to do their operations. In order to protect ourselves against fraud, policies and procedures are important. But are they enough? No, they are not enough, of course. I can say that you made a super law, but you didn't control its implementation, then you have a problem. It's like that time the law is useless, you have to check whether the rules you wrote or policies and procedures you wrote are applied or not. You should also impose sanctions. That's also a very important aspect, one of the important things to do for non-compliance with the rules. If somebody doesn't obey the rule, what are you going to do? And you have to have sanctions without exceptions, that's for sure. You have to apply it to anybody in the company. Especially if we talk about what needs to be done during this COVID period. For example, considerations should be given to the factors such as who and how much authority is given to whom in the company. Especially the signing powers, payment authorizations, and purchasing powers, those type of things are important. In this remote working environment, remote working period, are these powers and authorities abused or not? You have to check that, such as exceeding or bypassing these powers. Some authorization restrictions can be bypassed with remote working conditions because people have, how do you say, excuses, This is usually done by showing the urgency of the work or running the operations. People can tell you that it was urgent, we have to run the operation. These are the main excuses. However, for whatever the reason is, authorizations and approvals must be operated as they should be before the COVID period. And if you want to redesign it according to this extraordinary times, we have to do it. But there will be no exceptions. One of the important barriers for fraud is, like Adil mentioned before, is the segregation of duties. In this COVID period, it is also important. I mean, still it is important. The main idea here is to distribute the risk by placing critical processes under the responsibility of more than one person. When a single person carries out all the stages in the process with no checks, no potential existence or for errors or fraud, then we have a problem. Best case, we have errors. Worst case, we have fraud. The segregation of duties principle is separate checkpoints, and when implemented correctly, it is one of the biggest barriers to fraud. Therefore, our policies and procedures in the first I mentioned should be designed according to principle of segregation of duties. Another issue is the approach with our audits, which we carry out, as internal auditors. Processes and operations that are considered risky in the company should be addressed first in this period. Therefore, our first areas to be audited and observed should be risky areas of the company. What can I say more? The easy way to do all this remotely using this remote working environment. Of course, I mentioned data analytics. From purchase to pay process, supplier database entries, payroll transactions, account reconciliations are all can be done with basic implementations of data analytics software. You can do it by sitting at home, and observe the transactions. Can be done through data analytics. However, if your company doesn't have data analytics software, there's another way. You can do it by Excel. It will be harder and more difficult, of course. It will be longer process, but it can be done if you don't have the software. So another control issue, I think, is whether people are involved in the approval mechanism, use their powers correctly, as I mentioned before. Persons with assigned thresholds should also be checked, whether they exceed these thresholds or not. These are the things I think are important in the company processes during this COVID times. Normally it's also important, but this COVID period is also more important.
Absolutely, fantastic insight there. And I'm sure all of our, attendees are wondering, well, what can I do about this? What solutions are there out there in the market? So let's talk a little bit about the solutions that organizations can implement and put into place. Adil.
Yeah, so most of you are here because you believe in good controls and you're learning. You want to learn how you can improve that by solving the problems that are unsolvable today. And that's kind of the mission of SafePass, right? So we believe our customers use enterprise systems like, we have customers that use ERP systems like Oracle e-Business Suite, Cloud ERP from Oracle, which is a newer system, SAP, which has many different systems, Workday, Salesforce, Microsoft, you can go on and on. So there's probably top 10 systems out there that I would say a big chunk of our customers are using. 80% of our customers, let's say, use those top 10 systems. And when we talk to the customers, they tell us, look, we have good controls. So we have a three-way match set up in our procure to pay process that Saleh was saying. That's an important control. So you only pay invoices when you have evidence that you received the goods and the purchase order matches the invoice, right? You do that three-way match. You have that maybe in a manual system or even in your business system, your application. You have approval hierarchy, so you know that only certain people can approve certain amount of purchases. So a junior person cannot approve what the CFO can approve. So you've created that delegation of authority. You're tracking your payments. You have an accounts payable department that's reconciling it. You have IT security, as Saleh was saying, you want to make sure there's a good segregation of duties. So you have created custom roles in your ERP system. So the ERP system generally come with everybody can access everything, right? Which is a big burden on the customers. And we help customers organize that. Many times customers in these COVID times are going to the cloud, so they're implementing a new cloud system. And they're scratching their head because when they implement, everybody can pay an invoice, everybody can pay a supplier, and that's a lot of risk. So they're coming to us and saying, can you help us redesign those roles? But the ERP system they're implementing does have rules. So that's where SafePass comes in. On the right, you see this red sort of pentagons where we come in and help you. The examples I was talking about and Saleh was talking about is preventing SOD risk. So there's a question I'm going to go ahead and answer that by talking about this slide is, so when you talk to your management, say, look, we have this potential risk that there are 100 people that can create suppliers and pay supplier, the management is not compelled. They might ask you to justify, why do you want to go spend money putting a solution like SafePass if nobody has committed that fraud, if you will. So then you scratch your head and say, well, that's a good point. It's only material, it's only a risk that's potential risk, but nobody in our company, our management trusts everybody. And that's how Saleh was saying fraud occurs, because the people that are committing fraud are just like you and me. They're no different. They don't have a red nose that we can tell they're committing fraud, right? So then the question is, well, what happens? So we have the ability in SafePass to identify the materialized risk. So of the 100 people that we will report that can today have the potential risk of creating an invoice, paying an invoice, or creating a supplier and paying that supplier, how many have actually done that? So that's where transaction monitoring comes in. And that's where the data analytics is really important. It's around transaction monitoring, right? And that's been around for a long time. So we didn't invent transaction monitoring. We simply improved on it, made it enterprise scale. We added the large cloud database capability so you can transact. We have customers that have the ability to process 20,000 transactions a day. Instead of sampling, we have customers that can process all that. I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's an example of where SafePass can step in and help you find that data analytics. So we didn't invent data analytics, but we have improved on it because we can process a lot of volume, but we can also put workflows around it. So as you're working remotely from home or spread across the globe, you can continue to monitor the activity of risk management through workflows, right? And then, of course, reports available, there are rules available. You can write your own rules. You'll see a lot of examples on the right side are basically the rules you've created, like fuzzy logic, right? I want to know if there are two people are submitting the same invoice with a slightly different number, right? We have found in our experience that fraud, when people create a fictitious invoice, they typically use certain digits more often than not. So they'll put after the invoice number, they may put A or B or something like that, which fools the system from thinking it's a new invoice, but it's actually a duplication of a previous invoice because the date of the invoice, the amount, and the details, line items match up. So that's fuzzy logic that you can do similar analysis, and you won't be able to do that in your traditional systems. And SafePass can process that millions of transactions and find the needle in the haystack, which is better than doing that sampling method. Most of our customers have a sampling method, but that sampling method is not good enough anymore because they're working more from home, they're doing more things digitally, and they're doing more transactions online, right? So the sample size is not sufficient to give the comfort level that everything is working, right? So that's how, there's a lot more examples I won't have time to get into, but these are just a few examples that I wanted to share. Next slide. So if you think about the procure to pay process, previous slide. Yeah, I think we can skip the next slide. That's more methodology. But if you think about a streamlined procure to pay process, this is what it looks like. So you have business risks that are documented in your policies and procedures, that you don't make incorrect vendor payment. In red, you can see in that first block there. So one of our business risks is we don't want to make overpayments to vendors. We don't want to pay the wrong person for the amount, the wrong bank account, fictitious bank account, that's ransomware type issues. We want to be able to validate the invoice against the order, right? So that's our control objective in the second block there. So how would we do that? By using SafePass, it enables you to do that continuous monitoring, like the examples I was telling you. So it'll continuously look at your transactions as they're processed in your business systems. Within, you can set the frequency. You can do it every minute. You can do it every day, anything in between or beyond. So you select that frequency, and SafePass will actually go and start examining those invoices. Like the example, like you can set up your own rules saying that if the invoice number is 90% similar, so invoice 1000 and 1000A will flag as 90% similar. And we can actually take that incident and put that transaction on hold in your ERP system. And that's how we make sure the auditors can spend more time analyzing the data and the results that come out of SafePass versus sampling the data. So sampling data is ineffective for most of our customers. That's why they're looking for automation. So now what auditors will do is they look at those on hold payments and then pick the ones that are false positives and release them. The others, they will contact the vendor or their IT folks and resolve them. So now they've become 10x more productive. Their time has become more valuable. They can add more value to their organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can skip over the next few slides. And as I mentioned, if you would like a copy, or a follow-up call, we can go over these slides with you. But I think we should go on to the case study and some examples. Adele, and then Sally, you can add your own real-world experiences, and then we'll go on to the Q&A.
Excellent. Yeah, so thanks, Emma. And so those slides that we just skipped are more like, how SafePath solution operates, which I've sort of covered. And if you want to dig in, take a deeper dive, we'll do that one-on-one with you. We'll schedule some time with Emma. So example I'll pick is out of one of our clients in South Africa that has interest across Africa and other parts of the world, including Latin America. They had some challenges with erroneous payments. So they were processing significant amount of payments, and they identified that they're processing about $60 million worth of payments every week. And so that was sort of the problem. And they had, like many customers of this size, enterprise customers, they have many different systems and legacy systems that do payments in certain business units, have multiple business systems. So it's hard for them to know where the user is going in and what all users have access. They don't have a big picture that's clear, so it's very fuzzy. So we were able to help them solve that problem by extracting data from various data sources, creating a segregation of duty matrix that goes across different data sources and applications. Because it's easier if all your data is nicely tucked away in one application. Even that's a hard job. For example, Oracle e-business customers have typically 500 to 1,000 or more users that have access to 30,000 possible functions. Now, no customer uses all the functions, but even if you use 5,000 functions, that's a big number to analyze in a pivot table, right? So if that's the scale you're talking about, that's the customer we have here, but they have multiple of those systems, right? So one of the challenges they also had was around access provisioning, right? Because customers' provisioning systems are so diverse, they're trying to, for convenience and COVID, they're trying to give users as much access as quickly as possible as people are moving back and forth from home, back to home and back to the office, that they're giving them too much privilege. And the old accounts that had a lot of privilege has not been removed yet. So you have elevated risk of fraud in the business. So, access control, the solution we offered them was to enable a workflow-enabled workflow controls, so requisition controls, emergency access, we call it firefighter access, increase in external reliance on the ERP controls. The other thing that we find is when you have fragmented and ineffective controls, your audit fatigue goes up as a company, right? Whether you're an IT person in the company, just doing, let's say, a database administration job, or you're a finance manager, or you're a procurement buyer, all of your work is going to get harder if you can't explain the design of your control to the external auditors that it's effectively operating in your business. There's one thing to put a policy saying that we don't allow violation of three-way match policy. It's another to provide the evidence. The evidence get harder, you get more questions, and it gets harder for you to explain yourself, and you typically trip over something that creates a finding which then creates a remediation and you're tied up for a long time. So those are the problems we help solve. I won't have time to go into details of what we did for this customer for privacy and confidentiality reason, but at a high level, we were able to reduce 80% of their manual steps by putting in those workflows and data analytics that's driven off the workflows are driven off and reporting, as well as some analytics like the Benford analysis, the mean regression analysis. And so that helps you kind of automate and streamline the process so you can focus more on dealing with the materialized risk as opposed to just identifying the risk and detecting that. We take over the detection portion here and then prevention once you've established that risk as a valid risk. Lowered their ERP costs. So ERP systems are costly to implement and monitor and manage. Because these segregation duties can become pervasive, you have to manually go in and work around those problems. Customers walk around in CIO meetings with a checklist of all the things they have workarounds for, spreadsheets they're doing outside the system. So we found that a lot of the reporting and the actual controls were being done in spreadsheets. And there were a staff of people that in IT department that were just there to service the audit folk requests, like doing print screens of configurations like three-way match, approval hierarchy, creating custom reports. I see that's kind of the default response from IT when they don't have a solution like SafePass. They start building a lot of custom stuff, they add more people, and that's where the overhead adds up to your ERP, and pretty soon the board is saying, well, we were given this vision that ERP is going to simplify our business. It's gotten even more complicated. We improved the SOD controls, as was said earlier. So not only do we enable the customer to automatically detect SOD violations across multiple systems, but also remediate them and correct those problems online, so such as improving the role design, which is the root cause of many of these issues. And that accelerates their ability to get to a lower cost of business ultimately. So that's a quick story that I wanted to share with you about this customer out of Africa. We have customers on 5 continents. We have customers across all industries. So if you want a case study that's more like your business, that'll help you understand the problem better and how we can solve your problems, please reach out to them.
Yeah, Salih, would you like to add anything here? Any experiences that you've come across in your career?
I mean, it's a very complex software, I think, and it comes up with many solutions. I cannot add anything on top of that, but one thing I can say, all of those things, or those softwares and analysis and every how do you say, every code to capture the fraud over there, the anomalies and stuff. There should be, in my point of view, in my experiences, there should be a system to gather those data. Yeah, it's a very complex and satisfying solution, it looks like. Other than that, I cannot say anything about this. It's out of my area of expertise, you know.
Okay, well, we've had lots of questions come in, so if we can keep the answers brief, but we'll try and get through as many as possible. So Abia would like to know, how can I deal with management that is not convinced by risk exposure only when it's happened with a material impact? Who would like to take a stab at that question?
I have answered that, Sally. I'll let you answer it, but I'll just remind my answer, or re-summarize my answer. Basically, I gave the example of where SOD risks can generate 100 people that can potentially cause risk. You need to do transaction analysis to then say, of the 100 people with that potential risk, how can we get to the people that have actually performed that transaction? That's called materialized risk in our world, and we'll be glad to have a one-on-one demonstration of how DataPro, which is our technology for detecting that type of risk, exists and how they can service you.
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
Okay, next question here from Janesh. Can you explain how data analytics helps in finding fraud?
Yeah, I
think we
can.
covered that.
I can just give some example. Then Adil can knows better, of course. But as mentioned before, for example, if there are there is abnormalities in the database, for example, in the database of suppliers, there can be two suppliers with different names, but with the same address. This is a red flag for internal auditors, because different address, same address, but different names can be a red flag for a fraud. Data analytics softwares can easily capture those differences, like SafePass is doing so. Other than, I can give only this example, but Adil can elaborate more.
Yeah, so data analytics been around, like I said, for a long time. The problem with data analytics of the early days was that, number one, it was can't handle the ERP system, so it couldn't process 100,000 transactions. It can only do, let's say, 1,000 transactions. Just like Excel has limitations, the old data analytics had its own limitations. So SafePass has improved on that. We give you access to millions, in some cases more than millions of transactions you can process. The other thing that has changed in the last 20 years is that data is no longer in one data source. Our data is spread and scattered everywhere, right? So data analytics, the modern data analytics that SafePass can provide you, can go and do a cross-reference of data across multiple data sources. For example, our customers use, one customer comes to mind, they use Salesforce for their order to cash process, right? Part of their order management process, but the cash management process is in Oracle. So now you have a problem of finding risk around their sales compensation program or sales order revenue recognition program. You have to go against multiple ERP systems. You have to go against, let's say, Workday is their HR system. So that's where modern analytics can help you, where the spreadsheets and manual eyeballing the data is not going to work, because you may not be able to put all that together in a single source. So that's how data analytics can help you in a summary. The best way to learn about data analytics is to really try out a product, so you can set up your own rules and see how that works for you. And then determine, what are your needs as a business? What are you trying to accomplish? And then you can pick the right software, whether it's SafePass or some other software. That's your call. You can do basic analytics, like I said, in spreadsheets. If you have small transaction, if you have complex organization with multiple data sources, ERP systems, cloud, local, you need something like SafePass so you can connect, through APIs to, let's say, a web application, right, like Workday or Salesforce. At the same time, you have on-premise applications like PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, Microsoft, all of these that are on-premise. So that's where the challenges are today. The other thing I would say, end up by saying, is that also the flexibility of writing your rules. In the old days, or even today, if you do it in spreadsheets, you're kind of flying blind, because you're building the rules. So if you want to look at duplicate invoices, you're building your own rule right now, and that rule, once you're done, is gone. So it's not repeatable, it's not sustainable. What the modern analytics offers, like SafePass, is once you create the rules, that becomes part of your rules library. So for example, we have a library of over 1,000 rules on our network platform that our customers have used over the last decade, right? So we have this massive set of analytics and the rules that our customers have used, that they've shared with us, a library of rules. So you can pick from those rule sets. This saves you a lot of time. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. These are things that auditors like Sally and others have tested even before there was data analytics, right? So three-way match, approval hierarchy, split purchase orders, all of these examples have happened for many, many decades. Now they're just possible to pick it out from a library where they're predefined for you, and you can jumpstart your risk management process. I think we're 5 minutes over.
Yes, we are 5 minutes over. So we do have some other questions, but I'll be sure to follow up in an email or via LinkedIn with those questions that have come in to make sure we answer those. But before we do finish, I would just like to say that we do have 5 complimentary segregation of duties, complete risk and controls health checks available for those organizations that are interested in performing a health check. So please reach out to me and we can have a further discussion around that. So before we go, I would like to say a huge thank you to Salih for joining us today. The insight you've shared with the audience has been fantastic, and I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
Yes.
Thanks to Adil for joining us as well. And we look forward to many more sessions together in the future. So Salih, do you want to say some closing words for our attendees here?
Yeah,
Okay.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope to meet you more. I mean, thank you for everybody for attending, also giving good vibes to us in this webinar. By the way, this was my first. So,
and a great one it was. It was fantastic.
So thank you for applying. Thank you for attending, everybody, for the LinkedIn community. Keep in touch.
We will.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, and those of you who have asked for a copy of the deck, I'll make sure you get a copy of that. And so, yeah, a huge thank you to everybody for joining, and have a great day. We'll see you at the next one. Bye. Bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.